Hello everyone, welcome back to a new session in biochemistry, and in this presentation we will be looking into in detail the structure and the role of ATP, ADP and AMP. ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate. This particular slide shows the structure of ATP. It is a nucleotide triphosphate with a base adenine. So ATP molecule, it is formed of a nitrogenous base adenine, a ribose sugar, as you can see here, and a triphosphate. This is a triphosphate. And the triphosphate unit, it is formed of three phosphates, the alpha phosphate, the beta phosphate, and the gamma phosphate. Here you can see the alpha phosphate, beta, and the gamma phosphate. These three phosphates together, it form a unit which is referred as a triphosphate. Okay, the adenine, it bonds with the ribose through a beta N glycosidic bond. Okay, and the product formed as a result, that is adenine bound to ribose through a glycosidic bond, the product formed, it is known as adenosine or adenine nucleoside. And to this nucleoside, adenine nucleoside, if a phosphate is added, a single phosphate is added, the product formed is a nucleotide, and since it is based on the adenine, it is known as an adenine nucleotide or adenosine monophosphate. Okay, with a single phosphate group, it is known as an adenosine monophosphate, and this phosphate is known as the alpha phosphate, the first phosphate to be added. The phosphate is added on the 5' carbon of the ribose sugar. This is the 5th carbon of the ribose sugar, and the phosphate is bonded to the 5' carbon through ester bond, phosphoester bond. Okay, now the second phosphate, that is the beta phosphate, it is added to the alpha phosphate, and the linkage, it is linked via the phosphoanhydride linkage. This bond is the phosphoanhydride linkage, or it is known as the pyrophosphate bond. This bond is known as the pyrophosphate bond. So here you can see this is a glycosidic bond, this is the ester bond, while this one is the pyrophosphate bond. And the gamma phosphate, it is added onto the beta phosphate of a adenosine diphosphate, right? So when two phosphates are added one after the other on the 5' carbon, the product produced, it is actually the adenosine diphosphate. Okay, and this adenosine diphosphate, onto the adenosine diphosphate, when a gamma phosphate is added, we call it as an adenosine triphosphate. So this is a triphosphate, fine. And this bond is yet another anhydride linkage, and this is specifically known as the orthophosphate bond. So pyrophosphate bond binds the beta phosphate with the alpha phosphate, while the orthophosphate bond links the gamma phosphate with the beta phosphate. Okay, so this results in the formation of a final product which is known as the adenosine triphosphate or the ATP. Now, when you take a normal cell, like it may contain ATP, ADP and AMP at the same time, simultaneously, and it is found at all the times. Okay, and these are interconvertible. The ATP, ADP, AMP, they are interconvertible. You can see over here. Okay, the ATP can hydrolyze to produce ADP, releasing the terminal phosphate, the gamma phosphate, or we call it as the orthophosphate. This phosphate is known as the this phosphate is known as the orthophosphate, this alone, and these two put together, it is known as a pyrophosphate. Okay, this bond is orthophosphate bond, and the gamma phosphate is otherwise known as orthophosphate. Okay, now the beta and the gamma phosphate together, it is known as a pyrophosphate. Now when ATP hydrolyzes, it may result in ADP and the orthophosphate released, right? Or it can even hydrolyze and it can produce AMP, that is adenosine monophosphate, and a pyrophosphate molecule. So these are interconvertible, the ATP, ADP and AMP, they are interconvertible, and this interconversions, it is being mediated, it is being catalyzed by the enzyme adenylate cyclase. adenylate cyclase, right? The usually the what you call the ATP in a cell, it is usually found complexed with magnesium or manganese ions. The cell may contain a high concentration of magnesium, and usually the ATP and ADP, it usually exists in the cell in the complexed form with magnesium. You can see over here magnesium ATP, and it could magnesium ADP, right? It could be found in magnesium complexed as magnesium complexed molecules. Okay, so magnesium Mg2 plus ions, it binds with ATP nearly 10 times stronger than with the ADP. So usually the ATP, it is found in this form. Okay, now coming to the sorry, the bonds, right? The orthophosphate bond and the pyrophosphate bond, they both are anhydride bonds, and these anhydride bonds are high energy bonds. Why are they known as high energy bonds? Because when these are broken to release the phosphate molecule, a huge amount of energy is produced. That is, here you can see when ATP hydrolyzes, the orthophosphate bond is broken over here, and it releases the gamma phosphate or the orthophosphate. So what happens during this? A bond is broken, high energy bond is broken, okay, and it releases 30.5 kilojoules per mole of energy, right? And similarly, when ADP, it gets hydrolyzed, or we can say ATP is hydrolyzed, again it could result in AMP and pyrophosphate. Okay, pyrophosphate, again here we have a pyrophosphate bond. This is broken and these two are released together. Even in that case, what happens is it releases similar amount of energy, because that is also an anhydride linkage and it is a high energy phosphate bond. Okay, so this we can see that the what you call pyrophosphate bond and orthophosphate bond, they actually what you call stores a huge amount of energy, and when it is broken and a huge amount of energy is released into the system, which can be used for various purposes. Okay, so what are those? You can see, before we go into the different roles of ATP played, especially with the amount of energy released during its hydrolysis, we can see how it is being synthesized. ATP can be synthesized in two ways, that is oxidative phosphorylation and substrate level phosphorylation. Phosphorylation is nothing else, that is addition of a phosphate group. Okay, now what is oxidative phosphorylation? It is considered to be the major source of ATP synthesis or ATP formation in aerobic organisms, and here you can see it is linked with electron transport chain that happens inside the mitochondria. Okay, so here you can see, so it is the oxidative phosphorylation, that is synthesis of ATP from ADP, it happens inside the mitochondria. Okay, and it is in aerobic respiration. It is one of the final steps in the aerobic respiration. Okay, now the next one is substrate level phosphorylation. Here the ATP may be directly synthesized during substrate oxidation, especially in metabolic pathways. Substrate oxidation, what happens is the phosphorylated substrate, it may release the phosphate molecule, which may be taken up by the ADP, and this will produce ATP there. Okay, it is with the help of a substrate. Okay, so for example, phosphoenol pyruvate. Okay, it is a one of the final intermediary products in the case of substrates in the case of what you call glycolysis. Okay, the phosphoenol pyruvate, it is a phosphorylated compound, and it may get converted into pyruvic acid, and during this process what happens is a phosphate molecule is released, and this phosphate is taken up by the ADP for the synthesis of, or for the production of ATP. Okay, and this phosphate is usually a high energy phosphate because it will be added as a orthophosphate, the terminal phosphate. Okay, that is a substrate level phosphorylation. Okay, now this shows a summary of the functions or the roles performed by ATP. So as already mentioned, the ADP, it can take up phosphate molecule and sorry, it can produce ATP, right? And this happens via oxidative phosphorylation or substrate level phosphorylation. This ATP, it is an energy currency because of the presence of orthophosphate bond and the pyrophosphate bond. Okay, and this can be used for various purposes. The energy can be used for various purposes. So how it is used? ATP on hydrolysis, it releases phosphate, and also a huge amount of energy which is trapped in the anhydride linkage. This energy, it can be used for various activities like muscle contraction uh, or non-muscular movements. It could be used for secretion, absorption, impulse transmission, etc. The ATP, it becomes a very important part for the active transport of substances across biological membranes, plasma membranes. Active transport, it involves transport of substances against the concentration gradient. That is, from a low energy, low concentration area to a high concentration area. If the substances have to be pushed, it is against the concentration gradient, and that requires energy, and that is actually done with the help of ATP. Then we can see that the ATP also plays a very important role in phosphorylation of various products. Okay. Uh, then it also plays a very important role in internal heat production, that is like then bioluminescence, that is the natural light production, isn't it, and the production of bioelectricity. uh, Other than that, as already mentioned, it is a very important energy currency, as source of energy, phosphorylating agent it is. Then even synthesis of many molecules. It also serves as a reservoir of chemical bond energy for the synthetic needs of the cell. Okay, so all these are different roles performed by the ATP in a cell. Fine. So I hope it is clear to you. Fine. Thank you.